Thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you everyone for coming out, and thank you, Edie, for being here. What we're going to do for tonight is Edie will read from the book, and after she reads, we'll have a conversation about the book, and then we'll open it up pretty early to Q&A, because I know most of you probably have a lot of things you want to ask her, and rather than me hogging up all this time with her, it's good just to open the conversation up to everyone. So that's how we'll do it. So let's begin, Edie, if you don't mind, if you could read one of the pieces from the collection. And what are you reading, by the way?
Well, okay. I'm going to just do a little. First of all, thank you so much for coming. I see a lot of home faces, and those of you I don't know, I should know. And thank you to Evan and Booksmith and all you good people, and Oscar, who has come, even though once we were heckled somewhere else in San Francisco, so he's bravely emerging into the fray with you. So I was coming here in BART, and I was thinking about, I actually had an experience twice today of betrayal, and I'm not the kind of person who goes around in life feeling betrayed, but I had 2 moments of betrayal. And I was thinking, I am just coming back to the Bay Area, which is my homeland, and I was thinking about a couple of other things. So I just recently learned this fact, some of you may know, that a tracker, let's say in Kalahari, would imagine a silver cord, but from his heart out to the animal he's trying to find. And I just find that such a beautiful metaphor for how you find the thing that you want, and the trust in that, right? So different from betrayal. And it reminded me, learning this, there's a line in Jane Eyre where Mr. Rochester says, I don't know, Jane, it's very troubling, but I have this silver cord that goes underneath my rib cage from me to you. And he's trying to talk about his difficult, you know that, he's talking about his difficult feeling of love. And a lot of the way that this collection came about, which was over the last 15 years, since I didn't know I was pregnant with my first daughter, was that I would say writing this or compiling it, because it was a huge capacious volume, and then I wanted to make it a curatorial and slim volume. And it was like I was doing little silver cords back to these lost selves. You know how we all have these selves that we abandon at certain points in time. You know, youth is so blindered. You know, we have this kind of complete passionate intensity when we're young. And then slowly, in a way, our perspective widens as we learn, you know, the consequences, the severe consequences of aging, you know, some way. So this novel, in a way, is my attempt to, or not novel, this book of short stories with its nonfiction coda, it's kind of an attempt to collect those lost selves. But it's also a silver cord out to the potential reader. So, you know, the idea that all reading, it's so funny also just walking here, I stopped in the Haight bathroom and the graffiti was like, you fucking tech people, go home, San Francisco is ours. And there's this feeling, right, where we try to claim a specific locale and something is, we say this is not authentic, this is not ours. And so this book is my representation of the kind of imperfection of all these lost selves gathered together, and I'm hoping the reader would have some catharsis, not dissimilar to the one I had gathering. So this first, oh, and I should say also one more thing. So the title, Kingdom of the Young, comes from this. I was at an art colony. There was a famous older writer whom you would all know. And he came up to this campfire, and there was this younger visual artist who had headphones on. And the older guy said, what are you listening to? And the young guy with headphones said, no one you would know. And then the older writer said, one day you're going to be 32. So, and this older writer had also told me about this form where you write a story in 20 minutes and you swear you're never going to revise it. So the next morning I went home and wrote the story, The Kingdom of the Young, which is a title story. And I swear over all the editing and publishing, I did not touch it. So it's kind of an imprint of a particular moment in time. So anyway, this story I'm going to read, it's not autobiographical. I'm going to just read part of it. She was a bohemian girl with lots of life to live fast. Only in her early 20s, but making up for time lost to who knows what, to books, or the slow Cheshire cat vanishing act effected by her best friend, to a dreamy childhood with the wrong doors unlocked, like her outsized painting ambition, or the inability to trust those she knew, apart from her great uncle of the round head and romantic aspiration, who died but first told her in his French accent that he wanted to leave her a little money, saved up from teaching, so that when she found herself alone in a funeral home room with his ethylated body, he appeared to wink and say, "Go ahead now. Enjoy yourself the way I always meant to." Her uncle, who read books in many languages and taught English to foreign girl students from Asia, while never foregoing his strong sex appeal cologne, because how could he keep himself from falling in love with students to the point that the cashier at the local cinema knew him by the line he used whenever he took a new one out? But are there bigger discounts for sexy senior citizens? He had gotten poorly embroiled with the last Korean student who would not so much as kiss him if he did not marry her, saying, "The cow won't give milk unless it's fed." This student his greatest disappointment, since only death separated him from the love he thought might someday be his, a love first whispered by French poetry, later mouthed by smoke rings in American kisser films, he managed to see back when the Congo was still the Belgian. He had once dreamed of becoming a painter in Tahiti, and so there remained a whole heap of unused pleasure in him, which he ended up bequeathing the girl. With this sum, she planned to go to Europe because she too had read a book about an enchantress in Spain and a book about traveling boys and hijinks that made escaping the slate gray a correct course of action. While everyone had told her stories about the Alhambra in Granada, saying so determinedly it really was a place she had to go, a near peak of European civilization, the last place in which so many ideologies about love and faith interpenetrated, such possibility flourishing in that moment, if you could only travel back and alter later history, in which all streams continued in their straightened way. But you must go to Granada, they chimed. Well, she kept opening her Spain guidebook to the quotation from the medieval king who said, "There is no pain worse than being blind in Granada." And so it was confirmed, the message, especially as both parents had started to dwindle at their edges, death moving in toward the core. Clearly, there was no pain worse than living life too slowly. Once there, she bought a small guitar from a courtly guitar maker who asked if she would like to come by some night despite his wife and colicky grandson, while also not knowing where someone might take guitar lessons authentic to Andalusia. Leaving the guitar maker's small, cramped studio, carrying the guitar, she nonetheless felt as if she were in a story she had read as a child about a happy pig named Pearl, who carried in her satchel a magic bone. And the girl meant to speed life a little by getting coffee on her way back to a hostel populated by Viking descendants, when instead, a gypsy intercepted her with his El Greco face, all massive, drooping eyes and aquiline nose, as he unhanded her the new guitar and started singing to her right there to her in the Plaza Mayor, where she knew she had landed in the very center of the thing she had envisioned but had not named. "You have killed me with your walk," he sang, strumming her guitar, stretching it out, camino, chin wobbling at each O. Behind each tremble, a gaggle of ancestors lined up with the question of whether he could live up to them. He did his best. After his song was done, he asked with some seriousness if she might come live with him in the small caves up above where tourists walk, white dwelling caves honeycombed into the hills facing the Alhambra, which perhaps a king had made as a testament of love to his wife, a story that endured in a way that made her question if she would ever really know what it meant to fall in love despite her schooling in all the songs, because what had she ever known? Granada was either stripping her bare or layering on a new scrim. She was feeling more, or at least someone else's more. While the gypsy sang premature songs of love her way, she had almost been able to see him, or had been looking at him through blinds, unsure, since both possibilities melted as he sang. And of course, it was both risky and imaginary to throw yourself into another's thrall, when anyway, wasn't it always chemical? She had been curious about people throwing their hats down before her, but didn't know if she had ever thrown down anything or just responded. Was she to be so deprived of experience? Love, to fall in love. She had climbed mountains but never fallen. Others had been obsessed, sometimes with her. Was she only to know escape and absconding? Yet what was the strange thrill the gypsy singing to her? It had to do with all stories conjoining in a spot just above her navel, as if she were not on the road seeking, but at both source and end, dead center inside a kaleidoscope. This itself is a story about the problem with the picturesque, and how it links with the picaresque, and how certain girls are prone to confusing the two. Going out to wander the landscape was something like one of Claude Lorrain's mirrors turned backward on the landscape. If something seems correct enough in its set details, they forgive enough to think, here might lie fulfillment, the idea working, until fulfillment itself gives them the lie. At night, the gypsy and she did the deed, only one of them blushing in the dark on the floor in the gypsy cave, though somewhere she was also numb because she didn't stop to ask what, for all his singing about her eyes and voice, her smile, and a chance at amor, amor. What about him was fulfillment? She had chosen this. It was no rape. He was dead center with her. But was there any vastness other than mammal embrace, or the satisfaction of being in a cave with an avatar of Granada reaming her out of thinking? There was something they both tried to extract on the unseen side of the other, a mystery she would never solve ever. His animal breath in her ear, her face on the stone floor, the two of them more ancient because of the Alhambra beyond the window. The girl imagining him her conqueror, while at the same time being the film goer, curious about what the next scene in the movie would bring. She almost knew enough to name it, and woke the next morning inquisitive, her cheery guitar next to her in its open blue plush case, one she loved, as it also seemed to promise an interesting future. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there.